Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have an announcement to make. This is Two-Way Tonight, and I'm Mark Halperin. Thank you for joining. 24 hours from now, we'll have just concluded the debut episode, season one, episode one of Meghan McCain's Happy Hour, and we'll be in a much different mood than we are now. We'll be in the afterglow of Meghan's debut. I hope you'll join us for that. And 24 hours from now, we'll be kicking off a special episode of this program with a focus group, live focus group of young people from around the country talking about what they think of Elon Musk and Doge. You won't want to miss either of those, but you also don't want to miss tonight's show. And I'm glad you're here. If you're watching on the Two-Way platform, raise your yellow hand. If you want to be in on the conversation, we'd love to get some new folks in today. But if you've never raised your hand tonight. And if you're watching on YouTube or X, don't raise your hand, but do feel free to watch, yell at your monitor, whatever type of screen you're on. And if you want to go in the chat, as always, don't put smack in there because I get summaries now of the chat and I put hexes on anybody who writes smack in there. Peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace for all. This platform will be rolling out programs that don't relate to politics. But on the political program, we ask that you show some presumption of grace to everybody here, whether you agree with them or not. And as I always say, if somebody's talking and they don't agree with you or you don't agree with them, use it as an opportunity to learn rather than to hate on the program or vow to never watch it again. And when people write to me and they say, Mark, I'll never watch your show again because there was somebody on I didn't agree with, I go like this. No, 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 no. Just the opposite. You should be delighted to hear someone you don't agree with. And you should say, Mark, thank you for the program. Thanks to everybody at Two-Way, Noah and Sam and everybody for bringing me a program where I can hear a civil conversation that includes people I don't agree with. All right. If you were with us this morning on the morning meeting, you know our three big storylines and they carried through. Previously on the morning meeting, I wish I had some clips to roll in the morning meeting, but we talked about the talks in Riyadh. We talked about Doge, all things Doge, particularly focused on firings and on access to data and on court cases, and then everything musky, and then what's going on with Mayor Adams in New York City. All three stories advanced at least incrementally today, and I'll be running through that primarily through the use of the magic of videotape, what we used to call videotape. It's still video, but it's not tape because this stuff is nowhere near anything called tape. But I still like to say roll the videotape because I'm old fashioned. Noah, let me ask you a question because I missed this as I was setting up here. Is it true that Donald Trump is doing some sort of event tonight, right when Hannity's on? Is that really true?
To double check. I believe he is, but
I think he is. So that's an
I will
interesting
check.
thing. The interesting thing, he seems to be counter programming the playing on videotape of his interview recorded last week with Sean Hannity, where he sat side by side with Elon Musk. A few of those clips have been released, but they held the thing for 5 days. I got to tell you, very much respect Sean Hannity's judgment about television and everything production, but holding an interview like that for 5 days to me, I mean, crazy and risky. I shouldn't say crazy, risky, because you never know; it could be overtaken by events. But they did, and maybe they'll have to edit out some parts that aren't relevant anymore. But in any event,
There's an award
yeah,
ceremony for American service members.
tonight, right during the Hannity interview.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, all right. So let me tell you briefly the headlines in all three storylines, and then we're going to bring in our guest, the great host of the Numbers Game with Ryan Grudusky. You'll never guess who the host of the Numbers Game with Ryan Grudusky is. It's Ryan Grudusky. And we're going to run through a bunch of video and we're going to talk about it. On Ukraine, a long meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, between the American delegation led by the Secretary of State of the United States and the Foreign Minister of Russia. They agreed to form kind of working group to figure out how to proceed. They suggested that the two heads of government, Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, would be meeting maybe by the end of the month. And they had a lot of very positive things to say about how things were going. The mood music was very positive and very much like leaning into the notion that relations between the U.S. and Russia would be restored. Something, that bothers a lot of people and was not happening during the Biden administration. I'm sure people have mixed feelings about that. We'll talk about it, I'm sure. Vladimir Putin, who has been escalating his rhetoric about being excluded from these talks, escalated it to 11 today. I did my Musk thing off camera, so I don't get a screen grab, but you can imagine where my arm is. He escalated it and denounced the talks and was kind of sarcastic about the fact that he was excluded. He's on a tour of the Middle East. He's actually in Turkey now, and of course Turkey is at the gateway of Asia, so it straddles the world. But apparently, he was going to a state president. There's just a lot of thematics to it, and I want to do a show where we have some.
So that,
So-
I mean, I don't really take a poll though. Usually people I know saying, "Oh, where do you get your news from?" But the ones who said I watch two-way every single day, one of them is a reporter out in California who's very, very smart. So I was pleasantly surprised.
All right. Well, I'm pleasantly pleased that you're here. I'm not surprised because Lori told me you were coming, but it's delightful to see you. Ryan, tell people the numbers game. Where can they listen? How often does it come out? What's it cover?
So Numbers Game is a polling and data-driven podcast that comes out once a week. It's on iHeartRadio. It's on the Clay and Buck Radio Network. We just had on Marjorie Taylor Greene to talk about Doge, her first long-form interview talking about Doge. She's the chair of the Doge subcommittee, which was really interesting. We have an episode we're working on right now about what it's like to run for public office and the business side of politics, which is very good. I've worked in politics basically my entire life. And yeah, it's a great, fun 30 to 40 minute podcast once a week. So check it out.
When does it drop?
Mondays on iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
You may have already said that. I was thinking once you said Clay and Buck, my head went to a place because I just read that they're going to be doing their show from the Pentagon.
Yes, very exciting stuff.
Very exciting. Do you know those two guys personally?
Yeah. Yeah, of
They're
course.
ver- they're very talented guys playing Buck.
Yeah, I mean, Buck's career is very interesting because he worked for the CIA for a while. I mean, he's been his career is very how they both got there actually is very strange because also Clay started off as a sports. So I mean, they're
Yeah.
both now covering stuff. It's great. They're great
I
guys.
I met Clay at the Penn State Ohio State game, and man, people love that guy. It was like being with Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah,
People
and they
just
got well, I wouldn't go that far, but
I
but
technically I'd never been with Marilyn Monroe, so it's like saying this tastes like garbage. I've never eaten garbage, but it
right.
seemed like what I imagine it would be like to be with Marilyn.
Yeah, I mean that says a lot, I guess, about him. I don't know. He's got some avid fans. They love talking about him playing the flute on Twitter. I don't really know what that's about, but he's a great guy. They're both great, and their show is doing tremendously successful. So I'm part of their network with a few other
Yeah,
podcasters. So it's
yeah.
it's
Well,
fun.
that's awesome. That's awesome. People, I never read the chat, but sometimes I glance at it. Clay is Clay Travis. We're talking about Clay Travis.
Yes,
Somebody asked in the chat, and I'll tell you, Clay Travis told me he loves two way. He was probably just being nice, right? You didn't listen to two way, doesn't
I think he does. I mean, Clay and Buck both read a lot of different places. They go to a lot of
he?
places for their news. They want to be tapped in as much as possible.
Right. All right. Well, Ryan's here. We're going to run through some video, then we're going to take your questions. I'm warning our affiliates now. We're going to go a little bit under. We're going to go a little bit under. We're not going to go all the way to the top of the hour because I got a flight to catch and I don't want to miss it. But we'll go here. Now, President Trump today at this press conference he had um, talked about Ukraine. And he said one thing, which I'm going to play for you now, which is a little upsetting to some people. He basically seemed to be blaming Ukraine for the Ukraine-Russia war, and they're nothing good about that. Sam, please play number one.
I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed, and they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad. But with all of that being said, look, it is what it is. When I left, there was no chance that this could have happened. But it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taken place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll and Zelensky's at 4%, who's living there? You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down. And this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
All right. So Ryan laughed, and the funny part was funny because it's the kind of thing he says that makes people like me and Ryan laugh. But Ryan, am I wrong? Did he appear to be blaming Zelensky for the war?
I mean, he's constantly been harsh on Zelensky, and Zelensky has been a bit of a punching bag throughout the entire campaign. He's not wrong on the merits, though, of the population decline in Ukraine. It begs the question to
Forget that
defenders.
part. Forget that part. Just
Okay.
he seems to be saying Zelensky should have ended the war sooner. It's his fault, and this is just is constant veering towards Putin that troubles a lot of people.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
no.
I understand why it troubles people. Obviously, Ukraine wasn't responsible for the war. There were a lot of mistakes made by the West, I think, for the last 30 years that predates Trump, predates Zelensky, going back to the end of the Soviet Union. But I don't know if he's done this a lot. I mean, this is not the
Yeah, he
first time he's
has.
blamed
He
Zelensky.
has. He has. I'll say this. I think that if the war is ended on whatever terms, as long as the territory established for Ukraine is protected, as long as that happens, then I think the history of Biden and Zelensky and how they interacted is going to warrant a lot of scrutiny because they did mobilize to protect Ukraine and kept Russia from taking over Kyiv, but they didn't have a system. They didn't execute a plan that ended the war or that pushed the Russians out. Right? I mean,
They had
they
no
did
win.
something.
There was no avenue
There
for
was
them to
no way.
win.
There's
There
no
was
avenue
no way Ukraine was going to win.
because
Demographically, there was no way Ukraine's going to win.
correct. My joke, but it was true for the whole war was Zelensky was willing to make a deal on only except under two circumstances. When the war was going poorly, he didn't want to make a deal because he was losing and he knew the deal would be on poor terms, and he didn't want to make a deal when the war was going well for him because things were going well. Why would he want to make a deal? Right.
Right.
So the Biden administration got funds, built the coalition. They did some things that I think are positive, but in the end, there was no end game strategy to end this thing, let alone win it. And the President Trump right about that.
They proved that Russia is not a global power. It's barely a regional power. That the Russian army is not what people think it is. It's not the Soviet Union army at all. They couldn't even take Kiev. So that was positive. There's a lot of technological advances with drone war now that we've sit there and seen in a real way in first world countries. I think that the ultimate question is what is the point of Ukrainian borders if there's no Ukrainian people? And there will not be Ukrainian people in 30, 40, 50 years at the rate this war is going. There just won't be.
Yeah. All right. A couple things, and we're going to go back to the clips. There are certain people who text me during the show. They're extraordinarily generous because they know I'm doing the show and they want to make sure I don't miss anything. And the producers are producing. Apparently, we had a little glitch on YouTube. Those who watch on YouTube, I'm glad to see you back. Thank you for being back. So a few things. First of all, I was told my hair looks good tonight. It's because I napped on it on the ferry, so it's a little puffy, which some people like. Thank you for that. The JFK Library here in Boston was closed today, and visitors were escorted out after the National Archives executing a Trump administration order directed employees who were still in their probationary periods to be fired. 5 people were fired, which is a lot. That's not a very big library. Lastly, Senator Eric Schmidt, tweeted in reaction to Donald Trump naming as his nominee to be U.S. ambassador to Denmark, which is obviously very key because of Greenland, a guy named Ken Howery, who was ambassador to Sweden when Trump was president the first time and is a co-founder of PayPal. I've heard of that guy. Anyway, in reaction to that announcement, which Donald Trump made, of course, on Truth Social, Eric Schmidt, senator from Missouri, said, when we buy Greenland, we should call it, he asked the question, when we buy Greenland, should we call it Magadonia? I don't know if that's been around already, but I find that humorous. All right. Anyway, thank you from New Hampshire for that text. All right. President Trump on Truth Social just now instructed the termination of all remaining Biden-era U.S. attorneys. Again, the Bush administration did this. Others have done it in part. You don't keep the previous administration's U.S. attorneys in, even on an acting basis. Sometimes they keep a few for pecuniary reasons. But in any event, that happened. I was sort of expecting that to happen sooner. All right. The president also talked today at that same event about how he's confident he can get a deal done. Marco Rubio talked about his confidence in President Trump. I won't show you those because I want to move to a different topic. This is Stephen Miller, love him or hate him, domestic policy advisor to the president, on CNN, fighting with anchor Brianna Keilar about Doge cuts. Sam, please play number 7.
American people are exhausted and tired of watching their tax dollars be corruptly spent, abused, wasted, and in every sense robbed and stolen from them. This president, for the first time in history, is committed to restoring accountability at every level of the federal government. You may assert there's no waste in the Pentagon. You may assert there's no waste in
Stephen,
Treasury.
I'm not
you may
asserting,
assert there's no waste in HHS.
Stephen, I don't think anyone...
Then why are you not celebrating these cuts? If you agree there is waste, if you agree there is abuse, if you agree there is corruption, why are you not celebrating the cuts, the reforms that are being instituted? Every day that no action is taken, the entire salaries of American workers that are taxed disappear forever.
Stephen, let's calm down.
This is
we're not having a debate.
There's no reason
about whether there are
places.
You
are clearly trying to debate me, and I will be as excited as I want to be about the fact that we are saving Americans billions of dollars, that we are ending the theft and waste and grift and corruption, that we are stopping American taxpayer dollars from subsidizing a rogue federal bureaucracy that has been relentlessly weaponized against the American people.
Okay,
you may
Stephen,
not care about
I'm
this
not
issue.
Talking about
your colleagues may not
there's
care about
not
this
an
issue.
area
But we care about this
to cut in
issue.
the
The
government. I
American
understand
people
that,
care about
Stephen.
this issue.
They also care about privacy.
And the American
so let me
public
ask you about
overwhelmingly
that.
supports what President
Stephen,
Trump is doing.
All right, Ryan, I just love your overall view of that exchange. Like, for leaving aside the theatrics, like, what's the deeper meaning there?
Well, I mean, it says a lot, when someone who doesn't have many emotions is trying to convey any of them. But I think that the conversation Republicans want to have is over spending cuts, over balancing the budget, over waste, fraud, and abuse, because they do not want to make Elon Musk the main center of the conversation. They don't want it to be about him or about data or about privacy or about the question of AI coming into the administration. That they don't want that conversation to happen. And Republicans and Democrats are, for the most part, talking past each other. So that's the main problem with DOGE right now. And as long as the conversation is all these flashy spending cuts and all these useless government programs or all these insane government programs like, treadmill for shrimp, then the Republicans will win the news cycle. But the minute the conversation starts changing to conversations over Elon or data, it becomes more problematic.
So I've said before, the only thing harder than running against Donald Trump in a political election is covering him. I am an experienced reporter. I think a lot about news coverage. I think I understand Team Trump and Donald Trump decently well. It's really hard to cover him. It's just hard because they have so many tactics and strategies for making it difficult for reporters to do their job. And some of them are small, some of them are subtle, some of them are sledgehammer. This thing going on with the Associated Press, to review for those of you not paying attention, Associated Press refuses to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of Trump. I'm sorry, the Gulf of America, and they'll say the Gulf of Mexico, which Donald Trump has renamed the Gulf of America. That's not good enough for him. And so, for the last week or so, they barred the Associated Press reporters and sometimes photographers, I believe, from attending events, covering events. Oh, even in the pool, and then last weekend, an open press event. So the Associated Press is up in arms. They don't want to back down. They'll probably eventually challenge this in court. There's a grave principle at stake, which is you cannot let a government official correlate access with what you do in terms of your news coverage. So it's a very sacred principle for the media as a protector of the First Amendment. But the American people don't give a rat's ass about the Associated Press being in the pool or not. And the rest of the press corps is kind of divided because they want to support the Associated Press because they don't want stuff like this to happen to them, and they believe in the principle. But at the same time, people called for a boycott, say, don't cover the briefings, don't cover the events that the AP is barred from. Well, that's not practical. We're in the midst of one of the biggest news stories of the modern era. You can't do it. So this divides the press in a very profound way. And the AP has just put out a new statement. This is about the government telling the public and the press what words to use and retaliating if they do not follow government orders. The White House has restricted AP's coverage of presidential events because of how we refer to a location. The Associated Press has provided critical and independent coverage of the White House for over 100 years. That resonates deeply with me as a protector of the First Amendment, as someone who's been a member of the White House press pool. But again, the public doesn't care. And this just distracts and divides. It's brilliant. And of course, it's like freedom fries. For MAGA, of course we want to call it the Gulf of America. Or you might be an American and say, there's Trump again doing some ridiculous thing. But you're not going to be opposed to it in some vociferous way. So here's Donald Trump himself, number 5, Sam, talking about this fight with the Associated Press. And watch his countenance. Like, you can tell, as we say at McDonald's, he's loving it. Number 5, please.
Take for you to reconsider the restrictions on the Associated Press. And secondly, some of your advisors are concerned with the Associated Press's style guide, using language and giving guidance to not use words like illegal immigrant.
Mark Caputo, our friend Mark
to
Caputo,
use phrases like gender-affirming care. And they're concerned about that being an encroaching amount of liberalism in the way in which the press writes about things. Do you share those concerns?
Well, I do think that some of the phrases that they want to use are ridiculous. And I think, frankly, they become obsolete, especially in the last 3 weeks, because many things have happened in the last 3 weeks. And I didn't know about that, but I would say that if they want to use certain phrases like that, and I guess some are okay, but many aren't, but the Associated Press just refuses to go with what the law is and what is taking place. It's called the Gulf of America now. It's not called the Gulf of Mexico any longer. I have the right to do it, just like we have the right to do Mount McKinley, and nobody's even challenging that. But only essentially, it's primarily the Associated Press, and I don't know what they're doing, but I just say that we're going to keep them out until such time as they agree that it's the Gulf of America. We're very proud of this country, and we want it to be the Gulf of America. Now, the Associated Press, as you know, has been very, very wrong on the election, on Trump and the treatment of Trump, and other things having to do with Trump and Republicans and conservatives. And they're doing us no favors, and I guess I'm not doing them any favors. That's the way life works. But, thank you for the question.
Huh. Ryan, what do you think of his performance there and just the general fight he's having with the Associated Press?
I mean, listen, Trump, and I like Mark Caputo a lot, so it's not about Mark, but Trump's biggest help through most of his presidency and candidacy has been the media, because they have made everything so petty and so small. They have forgotten narratives that people actually genuinely care about. If a reporter were to sit there and ask them about the deal Oracle made, right, with having a personalized mRNA vaccination for cancer, and asking if they were accessing federal data on cancer research, not only would Trump not probably know the answer, be very puzzled, or have to think about it, but it would spark a conversation over privacy that people genuinely care about. Same thing with Elon Musk, with this Washington Post, Jeff Stein, saying that they want to digitize and sell an AI. They want to have an AI system replace these workers. Okay, whose AI system? Is it Elon's AI system? This is a real question about tech people running parts of the government, literally running parts of the government. It is a conversation people should want to have. No one cares about the word Gulf of America. I understand that the Associated Press has the right to do it. No one cares. And by making themselves the central actor, they exhaust the American public to the point that they don't even listen to them. And that is the genuine problem. And it's been the benefit of Trump this entire time.
Yeah. And of course, Trump gets to just stand up there and say they're liberal, they're bad, they're wrong.
Right.
I'll keep fighting with them. And
Right.
and I love Mark too. And I understand why he asked about it, because he had an exclusive about kind of the origins of Trump's upset with the AP that go back further than the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico issue.
No, I like Mark. It's not Mark. It's Jim Acosta standing up with Stephen Miller reciting the Statue of Liberty poem that one time. It's all of them. It is an endemic problem of the institution.
I'll say that I'll do a slight amendment to what I always say. Covering Trump is hard. Covering Trump poorly is unfortunately quite easy. And Trump goads people into it. All right, let's bring you guys in again. As always, please say after I mute yourself, say where you are and then what's on your mind, and show Ryan the respect he deserves, which is ample. And if you don't have your hand up and you want to get in the conversation, now's the time. Remember, we're ending a bit early tonight. No one wants me to miss my flight. Mike, welcome in. Unmute, please. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark. Thanks. I'm in San Francisco, and I really appreciate the platform. I have a couple comments, and then I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The first thing is, a couple weeks back, you had on Two-Way Tonight 2 doctors that talked about mental health.
Yes, sir.
And I think that was really an important conversation, and I think it's something that really predates the election. I think we've kind of papered over people's tolerance around COVID and work from home, lockdowns, all those things. And I think that's a conversation that I think that should be continued. That's the first thing.
Yes, sir. I agree.
The second thing is around Doge. I don't know if others have had similar experiences with their city and state government, but out here in California, I mean, predating Doge, we've had $60 billion in COVID fraud. We've had a employment and disability fraud. We've had a bond measure in 2014 for water storage for the state that were never built. So I think it comes down to, as a citizen, just more competence and corruption. And so my question is regarding USAID, do you guys have a take around Mike Benz? He was on 2 main podcasts last week. I mean, what is your assessment of the deep dive he's done on USAID? Is he wrong? Is he right? Is he in the middle? I'd like to get your thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, I know Mike pretty well. I've known him for a couple of years now. He did have I think it was a short stint at USAID, but he does know certain facts about USAID. And look, they do all of our institutions, National Institute of Health, USAID, all these things have spend money to the tunes of billions upon billions of dollars that are utterly wasteful to continue and promote a lot of times overseas neoliberal policies. They have the general belief that without government intervention by American taxpayers, neoliberal ideas would crumble amongst many of the third world or the developing world, and probably wouldn't survive very well within Europe. It's I mean, the extent the American taxpayer through the military, through these organizations, is funding the system, how it run. I mean, when I say the system, when I like the major financial sectors of this entire globe and most stabilities of a lot of governments and oligarchs is stunning. Mike is correct on a lot of it. I don't know everything he said, but I know some of the things that he said, and what I've heard him say, I more or less agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know less about it, but I've looked at his work, and I know a lot of people think he's pretty good. He has his critics, but Mike, go
Well,
ahead.
and what's most concerned is the when he talks about the censorship apparatus overseas that was funded through USAID and the training of thousands of journalists as framing narratives. I think that's more the concern. So
Yeah, other countries do this as our government does it, funding journalists around the world. Sometimes it's a CIA secret operation, but sometimes it's just like well intentioned. But I think it's totally misguided. I don't like the government funding journalism. I just think it's icky. It's just bad commingling.
yeah,
Mike,
sure.
did you have one more thing you wanted to talk about, or was that it?
That was it. No, I appreciate the
Okay.
platform. Thanks.
All right, Mike, thanks for coming on. Tell all your friends. I'll expect you to bring in 7 people, and you'll win a 2-way mouse pad. We got a lot left because no one uses them, but we give them away. You can do it. You can use them for other purposes. Brian,
Yeah.
what's a creative use for a mouse pad?
A mouse pad, a door stopper. If you have a closed door, I mean, that would
There
would
you
work.
go.
Yeah,
There you
baby's
go.
room.
Mike,
There you go.
there you go. Mike, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell people who don't know where you are. What's on your
I'm
mind?
in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yes, sir. Great
It's a great
place.
city.
Beautiful downtown.
Yeah, it's a really a great place. What I wanted to comment on was it's in relation to Doge, but it really has more to do with who they're going after. The federal bureaucracy funded gain of function research at a sketchy lab in China. And when the virus escaped, it killed millions of people. And as governments reacted to that, they spent trillions of dollars, increased our debt. They attempted to cover it up. They caused the inflation problem that we are all still living with, and every American has suffered from. And it's just bubbling beneath the surface. It's going to be revealed that these COVID vaccines are very unsafe and ineffective. And I think that's going to come out very soon. And so when people are clutching their pearls about concerns about what Musk and Doge is doing, I mean, the other side of the situation is so bad. To me, it's the biggest scandal that I've seen in my lifetime. It's orders of magnitude worse than January 6th, than Watergate, than any scandal I can think of in terms of the damage that it's done, not just to Americans, but to people globally. And I really can't believe that it's not leading every story out of mainstream media. I cannot imagine, the stuff they're covering, how this is being ignored. And so, to me, they will have nobody in the media will have any credibility unless this is a major part of what they're trying to get to the bottom of.
Mike, I got to say, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't know for sure the origins of the virus, but I know that there's plenty of reasons to be open to the story. And what could be a bigger story than the country with whom we're in an existential struggle for supremacy in the world? Through their actions, potentially destroyed millions of lives and trillions of dollars and brought the world to a heart, ruined the education arc of many children, at least in the short term. I mean, and how my colleagues in the media couldn't jump on this as the story of the century. How they could not jump on it, I do not understand. I do not understand. Now, unfortunately, I can give you partial reason, which is Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, the minute the notion was came from the lab rather than the wet market. The minute that became a Trump idea, the press said, "Well, that can't be true. We're not gonna talk about that." This is, I talk about how the cover up of the loss of Joe Biden's mental acuity is the biggest media story in, I think, American history. Really think it's the biggest media story in American history. This is a pretty big media story, but it's also just a big story. And I will never understand. And I would love to bring on the editors of the division presidents of the 10 major mainstream media, dominant media organizations, and ask them, how could you not have thrown every reporter you have at this story? The New York Times covers the "It Ends With Us" movie controversy more than they cover this practically. It's just crazy. Ryan, am I going overboard?
No, that's such a great analogy about This Is Us. I could not care less about a story that gets large attention than that story about the movie. But I do know more about it than I care to know because it constantly covers it. You're right about that. Yeah.
Particularly in the Times. The Times is very invested.
Yes, they are. Well, they're being sued. So
yeah. Well, they were invested before that. Mike, I wish I had a better answer for you, but I will tell you this, and this happens with with weapons of mass destruction. It happened with Russia, which is for the media to acknowledge its failures would require an unprecedented level of self-reflection and public acknowledgement of professional malpractice. It's a lot to ask of an organization or an industry to say, we've screwed this up. And if they were doing it honestly, they'd say, here's why we screwed it up. There's simply no justification for the failure, which persists to this day, as it does, by the way, on the cover up of the Biden mental acuity loss, persists to this day. Failure to cover it and to throw resources at it and to write editorials condemning the Chinese. You just don't see it, and I can't explain it to you. But Mike, you're right to raise it. I appreciate you raising it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. All right, let's get one more in. Remember, we're ending early tonight because one of us has a flight to get, and no one wants me stuck at the airport. No one wants me stuck at the airport. Ken, welcome in. Thank you for coming. Unmute. Tell folks who don't know where you are. What's on your mind, sir? One more time. There you go.
There we go.
Are those the basic wheat thins? You got the low salt. Which variety is that? Are those a standard?
100% whole grain original. Only the
original. I'm with you on original. There's so many variations. I'm for original. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to my wheat thins. Yeah. What up, Ken? Besides the wheat thins, what up?
When I grew up, and you may remember this, D.C. in the late 60s, at that time, I knew that Social Security was ultimately unsustainable. Now, quite frankly, I didn't think I would make it to the point where I might be able to get some, but it's still unsustainable. And what Doge is finding is also the same thing. The U.S. system of government, not just the U.S., many systems of government have a lot of incentives for Congress to spend money and very little incentive for them not to spend money. And a lot of incentive to make programs and not very much incentive to make sure programs are running correctly. And as you pointed out this morning, that's both Republicans and Democrats, new, old, and in between. Anybody have an answer? Problem systemic. The problem is the voters. The problem's probably evolution, but let's not go there.
Social Security is one of the easiest government programs to actually fix. Remember, in the 1970s, the Supreme Court ruled that it's not a benefit, it is a tax. You have actually no right to Social Security. They ruled that well in the 1970s. Ronald Reagan mentions that in his Time for Choosing speech, if you want to go back to that. I mean, it depends on, it's not a question of can you sustain Social Security, it's what type of benefits do you want Social Security to deliver. If you wanted to go back to the original way it was created in the 1930s, you would start Social Security at like 80 because it's for people who will have passed the average. Original way was live past the age that most people pass away at. If you want it to be basically a retirement program for people in their early 60s, mostly now who are working, well, that's a very, very difficult thing. There's a million ways to solve Social Security as an issue. To create an actual lockbox for Social Security that it builds interest would be one way. It's just the fact. I mean, there are a lot of different ideas, no leader on it, and a lot of resistance to any type of change because it's one of those things that you could scare a base of voters into voting against it in any which way. But there are a lot of different ways to save it.
Because I mean, it's maybe easy to fix, but nobody's going to fix it.
Right. Well, it takes a real leadership. It would take something, it's like the debt. It would take somebody who doesn't care about either the popularity of it or has enough power within Congress to sit there and say, everyone, let's grab our hands together and jump up this cliff because they're not going to vote us all out.
It would also take a bipartisan pair, House members and Senate members who secretly met and had a pact to say, we're going to build broad support within our party.
And do either of you think that's going to happen?
Well, Senator Cassidy actually tried to do it, and he made some headway, and then some things happened that made it not possible. But it's going to happen eventually. It's not going to happen in the next few years, but it could happen. It's got to happen eventually. Ken, thank you for coming in. Grateful to you. All right, couple things before we go that I need to run through. Howard Lutnick was confirmed as Secretary of the Treasury. So that's Cabinet Member 17. That's number one. Number two, thank you all for coming. Haley put in the chat that she uses a mouse pad. You all can think about Haley whatever you wish in the light of that. Ryan, very grateful to you for coming back. Hope you'll continue to come back. Please update us on what feedback you get for tonight's appearance.
Absolutely. Batia from Newsweek just texted me saying you're doing a great job. I love this show. So
I'm not sure she's an honest broker, but Courtney, I don't want to overinterpret, but Courtney basically put in the chat that I should win an Emmy with Ryan for tonight's discussion of the Wuhan virus. So, Ryan,
I contributed very little to it, but I will take the Emmy if you win it. So,
do you have a tux that fits you?
I do. It's from a while ago, but I haven't gained that much weight, thankfully. So,
I gotta lose about 30 pounds to fit in my tux. So. We got to find out when the ceremony is. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting. Sean, Dan, and I. And then again, I will remind you, 2 hours. I hope you get 2 hours from me tomorrow night, or from me and my colleagues, I should say. Meghan McCain, 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Debut of Meghan McCain's Happy Hour. If you'll want to watch that, go to 2ATV/Meghan to sign up to make sure you can be part of the conversation here on 2A. And then 6 o'clock tomorrow night, this program. Much of it will be a live focus group with some really fascinating young people talking about how they feel about Doge and Elon Musk. I've not seen a conversation like this. I've not seen a focus group of people under 30 talking about these issues, how they felt about Musk before, how they feel about it now. So tune in for that. I'm grateful to everybody for making time. Sorry to cut it short, but you know what? 45 minutes to this show, Ryan would agree, better than a normal hour-long show. You can get anywhere else. So thanks to Ryan. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to my colleagues at 2A. Everybody have a good night. See you at 9 a.m. with Sean and Dan.